Welcome to another episode of the Krytan Chronicler. This is your host, Anchor. I'm also the guy who talks during the entire show, in case you were wondering what my name was. I'm just gonna jump into what's going on here. Eckhart, our protagonist with air quotes, because he's not really the main focus of this series, but he is our viewpoint character, and he has encountered a Norn, which is this very tall and broad-shouldered looking fellow, who he recognizes. So if you recall from last episode, Eckhart and his merry band went on a bit of a journey to Lion's Arch. So now he's living in Lion's Arch. He's moved from Divinity's Reach, which is the human capital, to the sort of central capital of Altiria, which is Lion's Arch.
I'll return the favor!
So while he was walking around in Lion's Arch, and this is actually stuff that happened while I was role-playing in-game, he happened across a tavern full of a bunch of different interesting characters. They seem to be having a bit of a drink, a celebration, or not really a celebration, just a regular night out with their companions. And that's where he met this fellow, Skoll Bjornson, who is Norn. And so Eckhart got to talking to them a bit. He got to know them a little bit and found out a little bit about their guild. You know, usual inquisitive kinds of questions that were asked. And yeah, then they went their separate ways. But here he was out in Applenook, which is a small settlement just outside Lion's Arch, and he happened to run into this particular Norn yet again. And I should probably preface this by letting you know that this wasn't completely a surprise. I happened to add a few of those players to my friends list after we role-played in the tavern. And so then later when I was on, I noticed that this particular player was in the area at the same time I was. So I figured, since I was planning to explore this area anyways, I might as well explore it with a familiar face. So I sent him a whisper, and we decided to meet up here in Applenook. So again, it's not completely spontaneous, but that's really as far as either one of us has planned anything. It's from here on out, it's all just role-playing off the fly. And so Eckhart is just kind of making small chat with Skoll here, trying to figure out what he's doing in the area. And as he's explaining to Skoll, you know, he is an adventurer. It is sort of his current mission to see all of Tyria. And he also has a prototype, as usual, to test. This time it's a little different than the turret experiment that you've seen in previous episodes. But like usual, he's not the best at fending for himself when it comes to all the dangers in the world. So it's better to have companions on the journey. So he's making a proposition to Skoll that they form a party, both out of character and in character, and team up to explore the area. So as he gets underway with this little exploration here, we're going to get to know a little bit more about Skoll. Before I say any more, I'll just let him speak for himself as Eckhart gets to know him a little better.
A bad feeling about this.
Kill him!
Next time, I'm gonna grab the most valuable thing I can carry and run.
So I wanted to point out something here, which is getting the story moving sometimes takes a bit of initiative. So you might be talking about doing something with a character, and if you've ever played with role players, they're all really nice people, and there's certain codes in role playing. One of them being, which is to never assume what the other character wants or is going to do. I mean, if you're going to try and pickpocket a character. You don't want to assume that that character is too stupid to notice that you're pickpocketing them. So there is kind of a code, and for the most part, I mean, most decent role players will kind of follow that, and they'll be very considerate of what your character wants. But at the same time, you also have to kind of take the initiative, otherwise the story tends to not go anywhere. It tends to hit a roadblock. And so you may have noticed back there, as soon as Skoll said he was interested in going, I just took off. I didn't wait for him to tie his shoes or anything like that. I just sort of took off because we could have gone back and forth forever, just been like, do you want to go? Yes, I would like to go. Which way would you like to go? I would like to go this way. I don't know. Which way do you want to go? I don't know. Which way do you want to go? It can go on for a while sometimes, especially when there isn't a set plan of what you want to do. So when you're doing this sort of open roleplay,
what do I do if I see a pirate?
It's good to
just stay alert, okay?
take a bit of initiative while sharing the direction that the story goes. And you can see right there, as we were walking along the road, Skoll was, telling me about how he's from Snowden Drifts, and then all of a sudden he notices this building off in the distance, and he's like, oh, that looks interesting, why don't we go investigate it? See what's going on over here. And so by doing that, he also kind of took charge of the story, which was good, because, I mean, neither of us really knew where we were headed or what we'd run into. And so we could have walked by dozens of opportunities to roleplay together, unless one of us, took the initiative to actually put their foot down and say, hey, let's do this. Let's stop for a moment. So I was glad he did it. It's a good sign that the player is really engaged in the roleplay and that they really want to have a significant part in the story. No matter how big or small the story is, you want all the characters to have an important place in it. And so even though we're just sort of wandering, we don't really have a mission or anything like that, it's still important that each of our characters feels involved in what's going on. And so, yeah, so I jumped at the opportunity to sort of explore this area. I mean, I had never been here as a player, and I assume neither had he either. So it made sense for our characters to kind of explore the area a little. And now you've already seen Eckhart's reasons for being out here. He's obviously looking to improve his engineering skills by seeing more of the world. Skoll, on the other hand, his motivations are deeply rooted into his heritage. If you know anything about lore, and particularly Norn lore, they are very much a culture that worships legends and stories and legendary heroes. I mean, their ancestors and the stories surrounding them are kind of like the basically their education from when they're small children. That's all they learn about. So the biggest thing for a Norn, at least a typical Norn, is to kind of carve out a legend for themselves and make a name for themselves in the world. So that's kind of why Skoll is out here. And even though it's a very typical Norn personality, it can be a good idea to stick with these kind of character archetypes, because for one, it makes it really easy to just jump into the roleplay. You don't have to spend hours explaining why your character is upset about some big intrigue that happened years ago and why they're now on a quest to get vengeance for another betrayal that happened, blah, 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 blah. I mean, those kind of interesting stories are great when you have like a committed group of people role-playing together. But when you're just meeting someone for the first time and you just want to jump into a role-playing scenario together, you don't necessarily have the time to like get to know a person that in depth. So it can be kind of rewarding to have a character that is, I don't want to say simple, but they're very quickly, you can very quickly recognize, what kind of person they are and what their motivations are, because then you can use that to lead to other types of role-playing. And so it's pretty clear that Skoll has this very traditional Norn sense of courage, bravery, and adventuring and creating his own legend. And so it made sense, because of that, for the two of us to team up. I mean, Eckhart needs protection out on the road, and Skoll, by protecting him, is improving his own legend. I mean, this is yet another story under his belt to tell, or for other people, the storytellers and the skalds of his culture to tell all of his brave acts and deeds. And I really like that also because it shows you that the player really thought about their character and their character's culture when they were creating them. Because you do have to know at least a little bit about the race that you're playing, and you need to know at least the basic fundamentals of that race, because when you think about your character, this is the world that they grew up in. These are, you know, the influences that they're going to have since childhood. You have to wonder how those are going to affect them. I mean, obviously not all Norns are as, you know, crazy about glory as Skoll is here. You don't have to be a typical Norn to play a Norn character. But you have to at least understand the groundwork and the background of that culture and how it relates to your character. And I mean, Eckhart isn't the typical human either. I mean, not all humans are engineers. Not all humans care about inventions or experiments and stuff like that. I mean, he's even been compared to being more like an Asura or even a Sylvari in a sense that he's very curious. But at the same time, I did make an effort to understand the human lore and the human religion in particular. And so you'll see, even in this episode, he's constantly referencing the 6 gods, and he's definitely adheres to that part of human culture. He definitely believes in the 6 gods. And so yeah, it's important, and most of all, it's fun to kind of take these things into consideration and kind of build a character like you're building it out of puzzle pieces in a way. And so just to explain what's going on now, Eckhart and Skoll, when they investigated that mansion, they realized it was actually the mansion belonging to a former captain of the Lion Guard. The Lion Guard is, of course, the police, you could say, of Lion's Arch. And so, being the captain of this law enforcement, he obviously made a lot of enemies, especially among the pirates. So the pirates attacked this mansion, and during the attack, they kidnapped, I believe, the captain's daughter. So we're actually on our way to go rescue her. And I've already explained how much I love the dynamic events. I mean, it as a role-playing tool, it's great. Even just as a video game mechanic, it's a lot of fun. But it really creates an opportunity to meet other players, because you don't have to go out and look for people. People will come to you. If you're doing a quest, other people will see that the quest is going on and they'll jump in. And, you know, maybe not all of them will be role players, but the few that are, suddenly you have an actual reason to talk to them. So even if you are a totally antisocial and you don't trust anyone and you avoid making friends, or at least your character does. Obviously, I'm not accusing you of being antisocial. Of course, a video game player would never be antisocial. But anyways, you have a reason, so you don't have to be Mr. Friendly like Eckhart is to meet people. You have a reason to communicate and interact with people just by going out and doing a quest. So we're just finishing up this quest. You can see there were some other players in the area. It was actually a pretty sizable event going on off in the distance there. And I mentioned this before, but obviously not all these players are going to be role players. Some of them are just there to get experience points or complete an achievement or something. But again, the thing about role-playing you have to understand is that really it's a matter of selective perception. You're essentially picking and choosing which parts and which elements that are happening on the screen.
Refreshing.
And you're choosing which ones are actually part of the story that you're telling. So, I mean, obviously when I pick up my turret,
Refreshing.
obviously when you're watching the screen, he doesn't pick up the turret just disappears and it's back in my inventory. But as a role player, that's not what you see. You see your character actually disassembling the turret and putting it into your pack, and that's what everyone else who's role-playing, they collectively see. So you're kind of choosing which parts are, you know, just game mechanics that wouldn't necessarily make sense. and which parts actually make sense in your story. So, I mean, all these characters, maybe they're just players getting experience, but to us, we see it as, I don't know, maybe a Lion's Arch raid on a pirate camp, or maybe a bunch of heroes were called to this area to try and take down a dangerous beast that was marauding the land. And so that's really what role-playing is all about. Like I said, the majority of it takes place in your imagination. You really just want to use the video game as a kickstart for your imagination. It's really inspiration for the story you're telling in your head. And so what's happening now is we just ran into a Char. Char are, of course, the very sort of feline, tiger-like race of Tyria. Formerly enemies of humans, but now allies. And if you were paying attention earlier, this is actually the Char they mentioned at the beginning of the episode when they were talking about the night they met at the tavern. Skoll was in a bit of a drinking game with another character who was a Char who he thinks cheated to win the drinking game. So this is actually the Char they were talking about. And you can see they are part of the same guild, which is the Tyrian Adventure League. And so, we weren't planning to meet him. I mean, I'm sure he noticed that Skoll was in the area because they do have, they have each other's guild location at all times. So maybe he came out for that, or maybe he was just getting experience points like other players. I mean, not everyone's role-playing 24/7, but nonetheless, it was unexpected for me to run into him. And so I thought, again, it would be a great opportunity to kind of join forces and add another character and another group dynamic to our little party. And you can see he's got a bit of a sense of humor. He's just joking about the reason he was in the area. He thought it would look good for the humans if they saw a Char killing pirates and killing centaur, because obviously the pirates and centaur are a big problem for humans. And as I mentioned, Char they used to be the big threat to humanity, and so there's still a lot of tension between human and Char. So he's kind of, or at least he's joking that he's out here improving human-Char relations by cleaning up some messes. So yeah, he's got a bit of a sense of humor. He's also, you can tell he's kind of a shady figure just by the way he dresses alone. Again, I mean, I'm no fashion expert, but I do like appreciating the work that some players will put into their character's appearance and how it can really distinguish them, and it really is a part of your character, the way you look. I mean, if you're a grizzled, war-scarred, battle-torn warrior, it's going to look a lot different than if you're just a skinny little researcher with goggles on like Eckhart is half the time. So it really is a part of your character and is important to how you portray your character. So you can see this Char, in particular, he's very shady looking. He's wearing lots of dark clothes. He's got the hood covering his face. And so it definitely has a part of his character. It has a lot to do with who he is as a character. But at the same time, he's not a completely elusive person. He's, at least with us, quite engaging and cracking a few jokes. And so as we get to know Nihilus here, yet again, you're going to see an example of sharing the lead and again, taking the initiative to sort of push the roleplay in one direction so that it never really slows down. So we're going to get to know him a little bit. And right now they're just talking about the Vigil Keep, which is that big castle off in the distance. And so Eckhart has already mentioned how he wants to see more of Tyria, and so Nihilus, again, really paying attention to details in Eckhart's character. He realizes this, and he actually uses that to recommend that we go visit this castle. So again, another good sign that the person you're with is really interested in role-playing when they really pay attention to these details that you give them. And of course, you don't want to, just dump load all your characteristics onto the people you're playing with. But you do want to, let them get to know you a little bit, even if you're a reclusive and loner type character. You do want to sort of give a few details so they have something to work with. And so I was really happy that he did this. He noticed that Eckhart was an explorer, and he decided to kind of use that to lead us towards the Vigil Keep. Thought it would be a good idea for Eckhart to see this landmark, and so that's where we're headed now.
Strength is mine!
So Eckart's just explaining what his prototype is, how it works, and the general idea of it. Again, something I just sort of thought of out of thin air. It's not really a important detail, and especially in this episode. I mean, in previous episodes, I, as you saw, used the prototypes and the experiments as kind of a kickstart to the role-playing, so that there'd be a reason for Eckhart to go out and meet people. This time, it's more of a little side detail, just some more interesting banter that I thought I'd come up with. Just that they'd have something interesting to talk about.
Some must fight so that all may be free.
And again, you never know if it might lead to more opportunities to roleplay in the future. I mean, maybe I want another excuse later to sort of go out and adventure with someone else, so then I have this sort of... I've laid the groundwork for a future story by saying, hey, I have this prototype, and maybe there's a particular creature that I want to, test it out on. And basically what he was explaining is he uses it to fire darts, sort of more like syringes, really, into enemy creatures, and those syringes then collect their blood samples, which can be used to analyze for, poisons, potential cures, or alchemical ingredients, that sort of stuff. And right now, Nihilus is about to school Eckhart on char culture. So again, Eckhart's new to the outside world. He's spent a lot of his time among humans. He doesn't know too much about the other races, so that's why it was really exciting to have a chance to meet a character like Nihilus and like Skoll as well. And so again, another good reason to brush up on your lore, because you never know when an inquisitive young human engineer starts bugging you about the inner workings and politics and social structure of your entire race. I also wanted to touch a bit about guilds. So we've seen other guilds in the past, like especially with the Ministry Guard, I should say, with Lydia and of course Sharos Genter. So guilds have a number of different benefits. It can be really great, especially if you're a role player, just to find someone to play with at any given time, because, I mean, I've mentioned in the past, it can be kind of hard if you're new to role-playing or you're playing a character that just isn't very social. It can be hard to kind of actually meet people to interact with. So when you have the guild,
I'll return the favor.
It's pretty easy. Just look at your guild roster, you can see who's online, and just send them a whisper, and then just like that, you can start role-playing. And so again, if you're in a big guild, it can be really advantageous to have all those different players at your disposal. And smaller guilds are beneficial too, because then you have a tight-knit group of people who know each other really well. All the characters know each other. So then you can kind of build on those relationships a lot more. You can have a lot more chances to create storylines and then branching storylines and go on to develop those relationships more. So there are a lot of advantages. The thing, though, is when you're choosing a role-playing guild, you want to make sure that you know what kind of role-playing guild they are, and if it's the same level of role-playing that you're looking for. As I understand it, there are
Strength is
3
mine.
general categories of role-playing guilds, and they are the light, medium, and heavy role-playing guilds. And that essentially refers to the degree to which they take role-playing seriously, if I could put it that way. So basically, to put it in perspective, a heavy role-playing guild is basically in character all time. When they sign into the game, the moment they log in, they're in character until the moment they log off. And those are the kind of guilds you want to join if you want to get into really long and really complex storylines, because you have that advantage of being with a group of people that can coordinate these sorts of things. You can set up storylines, and you can set up events for your guild to go through. And so from there you have a bit more direction. It can still, you know, branch out in unexpected ways. You still get that unexpected and spontaneous feel. But at the same time, you also get the advantage of having a more directed approach to role-playing. Not very dissimilar to tabletop role-playing. Like Dungeons & Dragons, you have a dungeon master who will kind of, not lead, but they will coordinate the group's efforts so that it can lead the story to a destination, so that it doesn't get too lost in the plot, so to speak. So that's kind of what a heavy RP guild is. And so for the medium and light RP guilds, they tend to split it half and half. Again, it depends if it's medium or light, how much role-playing they actually do. I would say medium role-playing guilds tend to be pretty half and half. Like sometimes they'll be playing out of character, so they'll play the game, but they won't be their character. They'll just be themselves, getting experience points or crafting items so they can sell it on the game's market. That sort of thing. But at the same time, then the other half of the time, they'll be in character, actually, you know, portraying their character and doing things that their character would do. So, like, once they're in character, they can't suddenly decide, oh, I want to go raid this dungeon, even though I have no reason to go there. You know, they have to be in character at least some of the time. So that's what you'll get into with a medium role-playing guild. That's a good idea if you're getting the game to roleplay, like you are interested in role-playing, but at the same time you do want to actually just play the game. Sometimes you don't want to
their knowledge alone
necessarily
make them valuable friends.
get into a big conversation with a bunch of characters. Sometimes you just want to kill stuff, you know, even if your character is a pacifist cook or chef. You know, sometimes you just want to go out and slay ogres. So that's what a medium RP guild is for. And the light RP guilds, as far as I can tell, basically it's like you're essentially just playing the game. You're there to be a player, to complete the missions, get the quests, get the experience points. You're just there to enjoy the game. But at the same time, you appreciate the immersion. Like, you want a degree of immersion. You don't want to, like, go into the game and talk about how hot Megan Fox is with random people, you know, or you at least create a name for your character that makes sense in the world. Like, you won't be X Slayer X or something like that. You'll pick something that's appropriate. So even though you're just playing, you do sort of adopt certain RP elements, and those kinds of guilds will get into role-playing together. Like, they will get up to actual roleplay, but they don't take it as seriously, and they're not as strict on having to roleplay all the time. So yeah, it can be really beneficial when you join a role-playing guild, but again, you want to figure out how much you want to roleplay and what kind of roleplay you want to get into. Now, the difference between the two guilds we've seen so far, the first one we saw was the Ministry Guard. And so I would say that was a heavy RP guild, just because not only was the guild comprised of all role players who were, as far as I could tell, they were pretty much role-playing all the time, but the guild actually existed in the world. So it wasn't just like you signed up for the guild just so that you could have people to play with. Like, you signed up for the guild because your character wanted to join the Ministry Guard, and then that became your character's job. Like, it was a serious part of your character to be in that guild. Now, with the Tyrian Adventure League, as far as I can tell, it is also... it's very roleplay oriented, but at the same time, it's not as strict a admission process, or application process, I should say. Like the Ministry Guard, you basically, as far as I can tell, you have to be a human, because it wouldn't make sense for a Char to be defending, you know, the Krytan Ministry. That would raise some suspicions. So you have to have a real in-character reason to join that guild. Whereas the Tyrian Adventure League, I mean, even as Skoll is explaining here, like, yes, he did have a reason in character to join, but it's kind of the guild where you can kind of sign up first, and if you get in, then you can come up with a reason. Like, then you can just say, oh, I met these guys at a tournament, and they thought I was a good warrior, so I thought I'd join up with them. And even as Nihilus explains, it's not so much a guild as it is an association. They're basically associates of adventurers and explorers, people who have a like-minded philosophy of exploring the world and adventuring together, basically. So that's why I wouldn't consider it as heavy a role-playing guild as the Ministry Guard, because it has these sort of out-of-character exceptions, basically. Like, you don't have to be any particular kind of character, and you don't have to have like a super important reason to join. It's really just if you enjoy playing with them and you enjoy role-playing with them, then that is reason enough. And so that's what Eckhart's kind of getting to know here. And I actually realized after doing this video that I had previously met another member of the Tyrian Adventure League. If you go back and watch the second episode, you might see in the pet show in the Salma district, you'll see one of the characters has the TALE, the tail tag of the Tyrian Adventure League. So again, yeah, you can meet a lot of different people and different characters when you're in a guild that you might not necessarily meet just by playing. So it was definitely a nice little coincidence to run into these guys. And so they're just sort of explaining what the guild is all about here, and how he got in. And of course, Eckhart is very curious. And you can see they got a bit of a buddy kind of sense of humor. I mean, this Char Nihilus, he definitely looks menacing, but he's got a bit of a sense of humor. Same with Skoll. He has a very kind of warlike sense of humor. I mean, he's joking about, you know, finding things to slay and that sort of thing, but still an easygoing character.
Strength is mine!
I'm not sure about the Dermond Priory. They're just scholars.
Their knowledge alone would make them valuable friends.
But all
I'll
they
return
crave
the
is
favor.
knowledge. Can they fight?
They better, or the dragons will feast on their libraries.
I feel strong!
So I should also apologize if my phone makes any more noises during this episode. I just got a new one and it's still confusing me. But anyways, right now what's happening is we just left the Vigil Keep. As we were walking, Nihilus explained that he was a member of the Order of Whispers. And so I should probably go over just a little bit about the three orders of Tyria in case you're not familiar with the game. Essentially, there's the three orders who are devoted to battling the Elder Dragons, and they are, of course, the big threat to Tyria. So the Order of Whispers, which you saw Boston was a member of, and of course Nihilus as well, they're kind of more of a espionage order. They're into gathering intelligence on their enemies and fighting them through spy kind of tactics. They're basically an organization of spies. The Vigil that's the actual castle that we were just at. They're more of the military end of the three orders. They focus on actual war tactics and battling and war strategies. And then of course there's the Derman Priory, which those two NPCs were talking about, who were more interested in research. They're sort of the scientific and knowledge center of Tyria. So they're just discussing them, and Nihilus also mentioned that Eckhart seemed like he would be a good fit for the Derman Priory, since he is a bit of an explorer and he's really interested in research and experiments, that sort of stuff, which is a main focus of the Derman Priory. But anyways, as we were walking along, Nihilus kind of took us on a bit of a detour here. And as we were walking, we noticed this little battle arena with an Asura kind of fighting for his life there. Actually, I'm not sure if it is a male or a female character, but anyways. We were walking along, we weren't even sure if it was a role player, but right there, as you saw, the Asura kind of made a bit of a sarcastic little quip about the fact we weren't helping him. So I realized it was actually a role player, decided to jump in and help save him. And as you can see, that's actually a really interesting part of Asuran culture, is the personality that comes with being an Asura. You can see he's got a bit of an attitude there. And similar to the way Norn are known for being very courageous, and they're all about valor and creating legends. Just like this NPC that we're about to fight here, you can see he's trying to prove that he can take all of us at once.
Like me can find multiple opponents.
And so, yeah, Norns are all about showing off and proving themselves, whereas Asura, they're really all about their own ego, in a way. They're very egotistical, they're very witty, and impatient with the other races because they see themselves as much smarter than everyone else. So you can really see that this player has taken that into consideration when creating their character.
For I am both powerful and kind. Regardless, a celebration is in order. You've proven your worth before the spirits and me.
So again, as I said before, it might not make you the most unique Asura to have, you know, that kind of personality, but it does make for a very interesting and entertaining interaction with other players, because it does embrace the established kind of cultural characteristics of that race.
Strength is mine.
She always had something special to fight.
I heard she once broke off a minotaur's horn and stuck it in the beast's heart.
You wouldn't believe what a stupid human just asked me.
The ignorance I've heard from this crowd could fill in Ettin's heads.
You know anything about that?
So this is a perfect example of why I love characters who really portray the characteristics of the race, because you can see Skoll here. I mean, he sees this whole arena as like a very noble way to, you know, prove your valor and that sort of thing, and prove your skill with a weapon. And so he kind of admires that the NPC that we fought for you know, risking it all. Whereas Yintax, as an Asura, takes a very Asuran perspective, where they see more the logical side of things. And so, from his perspective, it was completely stupid to try and take on all 4 of us at once, you know? And so, again, when you play these types of embellished personalities, you get these really kind of funny interactions. Like, seeing Skoll and Yintax interact, even now, entertains me beyond measure. So I just really loved the fact that we ran into him, or her. Again, I'm not too confident with Asuran anatomy. I still can't tell which are male and which are female, but I'm thinking because the voice is a little deep, I'm pretty sure it's a male Asura. I have gotten better at figuring out Char men and women, but Asura will take some time. They're just so small.
You realize the odds are against the betters. We've got little chance of winning.
We're betting on that one guy, right?
Let's put down the same amount as last time.
I took on too many times. Tied their tails together and hauled them out of the ring.
That's nothing.
The arena manager
I
says
fought
I'm
Etten
next.
twins and
She
put
says
them
that to
down with
everyone.
4 smashing
You'll
headshots.
be next if and only if you prove your worth in the arena trials. You wouldn't believe what a stupid human just
Now, I also want to point to the brackets. If you look at the chat box, you can see I made a bit of a typo, or not exactly a typo, a grammar issue, I guess. And so you'll see often the players will correct it with the asterisks, and of course the double brackets are there to indicate that you're talking out of character. And so again, that's just a way to clarify if you misspell something or you write something that might be misinterpreted and that you didn't mean to put, then of course you can put the asterisks in there. And again, it's not just role-playing. I think like all chat rooms work that way. But again, it's really only important if you're worried that something you said might be misinterpreted. Because I mean, if you forget to put an apostrophe in it, you know, or in don't, you forget to put the apostrophe, I mean, they're not going to suddenly not know what you're talking about. And all that really matters is that they know what your character is meaning. I mean, this isn't a spelling bee, and you're not going to win a Pulitzer Prize for your role-playing etiquette. So again, yeah, some players might be picky about it, but really all that matters is that your text is legible and understandable. But then there are a few cases where you do need to clarify this and that. But often what I'll do is when that happens, I just pretend that Eckhart made a mistake. Like, I'll actually repeat myself in character and say, oh no, I meant to say this. Because your character doesn't have to be a perfect speaker, you know, unless they're a politician or some kind of bard. They don't have to be a perfect speaker, and it's okay to sort of embrace little embarrassing accidents like that, because it kind of makes the story just feel that much more real, you know? I mean, some of my favorite stories or like dramas or television series will have these little bits of comic relief that are funny because they're true, you know? Someone like walks into a glass window. I'm sure plenty of people have done that at some point in their life. They don't like to talk about it because it's embarrassing, but stuff like that happens all the time, so it's okay for your character. Even if you're some super badass like Nihilus or Skoll, you know, if you happen to accidentally be talking, and as you're talking you just sort of fall down a hill because you weren't looking where you're going, you know, it's okay to kind of laugh at yourself a bit. I mean, having a sense of humor as a role player can make it a lot more fun. I can definitely speak from experience as a dungeon master trying to run a game of Dungeons and Dragons while my players are flanking their enemies by pulling their pants down and mooning them. But anyways, having a bit of sense of humor does make it a bit more fun, and it can be more realistic because, you know, life doesn't have to be super serious all the time, neither does role-playing. And it's even happened to me in the past too, where I'd be typing something, I'd have the auto walk or auto run on, and because I'm typing, I'm not actually paying attention to where I'm going, and I just like run into a pole suddenly, and I'll actually just go with it. I'll just be like, you know, just pretend I walked into that wall because I was talking over my shoulder and I happen to not be paying attention where I'm going. You know, it adds a bit of a realism, and instead of correcting yourself, you're taking a mistake that you made and you're turning it into something actually, you know, entertaining and realistic in a way. And I mean, I've already mentioned people make brain farts and they mumble all the time. I've probably mumbled through half of the words I'm saying in this episode, but you kind of just have to embrace it, and nobody has to be perfect, so neither does your character.
Hauled them out of the ring.
That's nothing. I fought Etten twins and put them down with 4 smashing headshots.
So unfortunately, I did try to get Yintax to join our little party there, but
I'll return the favor.
He did have business in Lion's Arch. Whether or not his character had business or if it was just the player had something else he or she had to do, then I'm not really sure. But in any case, it was still a nice little detour getting to run into him. I mean, I wish I could have shown all of the conversation because it was really a really entertaining character to talk to. But we did keep moving on here. And so Nihilus, as I mentioned before, he after we left the Vigil Keep, he recommended we check something out. He was a little vague as to where he was taking us, but Skoll and Eckhart are, of course, always interested in exploring new areas, so they merrily followed him along. And now, it's a good sign of how trusting Eckhart is. I mean, he knows these two a little bit. I mean, he did spend quite some time drinking with them in the tavern, but at the same time, you know, he doesn't know them that well. It's not like they're old friends or anything, so he doesn't actually know where he's being taken to or whether or not he can trust them. But again, Eckhart is just, that's the kind of character he is. He's very trusting. He always gives people the benefit of the doubt and has a very positive attitude towards people, which so far has paid off, but you never know. It might work out for the worst one of these days. And so I took advantage of this little break from the action to get to know Skoll. I was surprised, actually, at how much we actually got done this episode and how much questing, I don't want to say questing, but how many battles there were just alone in the first while we played. I mean, this is actually, I think, an hour or two of footage that I had to chop up, unfortunately, because I can't fit all of it in the episode. But yeah, a lot happened, so I didn't really get a chance to get to know him that well, but took advantage of this moment now. And again, one thing I'll do when I'm role-playing is I'll try to save up questions. So like if we're in the middle of a situation where it's not necessarily the perfect circumstances to break out into conversation, like say we're in the middle of a battle or we're running for our lives, then, you know, you might have a great idea, like, oh, I want to ask him about this, or I want to talk about this, but you can't do it at that time. You kind of want to save it for later and kind of stock up these sort of conversation topics so that when you do reach a lull or a quiet period or an awkward silence or something like that, then you can just suddenly bring up something, oh, remember 10 minutes ago we were talking about this? Well, I had this question. And that's what I'll do is as I'm playing, I'll just think of things, think of details, like Skoll mentioned he's from Snowden Drifts, so I could have asked him what that was like or what it was like growing up there. Nihilus mentioned he was part of the Ash Legion, so I could have asked him if he had any interesting missions or really fond memories that he'd like to share. So yeah, you can kind of think of those details as little
None of you bookworms have
starting points for conversation.
Me?
Maybe if we ignore him, he'll go away.
Yeah, here we have another Norn, yet again,
so well last time.
trying to prove his legendary skills in battle. And this is why it was really fun to have Skoll around.
Bear, one of us is going to get hurt, and it's not going to be me.
Nihilus and me, we just sort of sat back and watched the action.
Refreshing. Rydar Rock Crusher has been defeated?
Thank the gods. He'll go on forever if someone doesn't stop him.
He gives a guy a
And that's why it's good to have a Norn in your party, because they're always eager to get into a fight. And if you're not the fighting type like Eckhart, then it can be very valuable. And you can see Nihilus, I mean, Nihilus, as you've seen so far, is a capable thief. But at the same time, you know, he's not gonna get any bruises that he doesn't need to, if he doesn't need to. So it's kind of funny that that Eckhart and Nihilus kind of just stood back and let Skoll do his thing, get his Norn on. And so as you're walking, you actually saw there's the Derman Priory off in the distance. So they're sort of walking along there. As I understand it, it's built upon dwarven ruins. So dwarves were in the first game, but they're no longer in Guild Wars 2. They went extinct, I guess you could say, during a big event that I won't get too into. If you are interested, you gotta check out those lore videos that I linked in the previous episode. But this is the Derman Priory, and I said before, they are the information center of Tyria. They're really all about collecting research. So Nihilus thought it would be a good idea to take Eckhart there and show him around, and also as a side reason for coming, he mentions that he had a book that he had to return.
Faster!
And so I took that as a opportunity to ask him about the book and figure out what his character is all about, since we haven't really gotten to know him too much.
I'll return the favor!
And I do also want to point to another thing I did there, which is something I'll do when I'm role-playing with someone spontaneously, is when you ask questions, you have to keep in mind that not everyone you role-play with has a very extensive background for their character worked out. I mean, some people, again, there's hardcore role-players who are in character all the time, and they have pages and pages of character history. I should also explain why there's a Christmas present there before I go on. This was recorded during the Winter's Day event, which is basically like a holiday event in Tyria, which is why there's Christmas presents all over the map, in case you were wondering, scratching your head at that. But anyways, as I was saying, is not everyone has, you know, pages and pages of character background. I mean, not everyone even role plays all the time. A lot of the people that I've role played with, you know, it was their first time role playing. They just sort of saw what I was doing and decided to play along, and it actually worked out really well. But you have to kind of be lenient when you're prying into their character's history, because maybe they don't have an answer for everything on the fly. Like if you ask them, what was your mother's maiden name, you know, they might not necessarily have an answer ready, and they have to think of something on the spot, and that can kind of, if they don't have an answer, kind of break the immersion for both of you in a way. So you have to be careful when you're asking questions like that. What I try to do is I try and give a suggestion as I'm asking the question. So a minute back there, what Eckhart did was he asked him about the book that Nihilus brought. So when Nihilus brought up the fact that he was returning this book to the Derman Priory, I wasn't actually sure if, like, this was actually legitimate, you know, part of his character's story, like he actually was here before in game role-playing and got a book and he's actually here to return it, or if you just sort of, it's one of those details that you make up on the fly to kind of keep the role-playing going. I mean, people do it all the time. So if in the latter case, you know, maybe he doesn't actually, maybe he hasn't come up with a name for this book, or he doesn't know what it's about. Maybe he just said that as a little mini explanation for what's going on. And so I didn't want to kind of like ask him what this book is about and kind of put him on the spot when he really only brought it up as a little tidbit, a little minor detail. So when I asked him what the book was about, I also kind of gave a miniature suggestion. And I said, like, oh, is something about war tactics? Because I figured he's a Char, and Chars are very, they revel in war and bloodshed and that sort of stuff. So, I did that to just in case he didn't have an answer ready. I just sort of ask a question and give a suggestion at the same time, just so that if they don't, then they can go with the suggestion you've given and just be like, yeah, that's definitely what it is. Or if they have something figured out, then we haven't, you know, made any assumptions that will break the character.
Say it's because Krytan is the most universal language.
How can it be universal? It only has one word for hunt.
So I had to skip over a little bit of footage here. Unfortunately, my computer was running out of space with all the videos I've been recording. This is before I got my external hard drive, so I had to delete a few things. But not much happened. We basically went into this instance, which is sort of like a private area in the game, so it's just our party in here. And it's inside the heart of the German Priory. You can see there's all the books around us. And so as we entered, Nihilus explained that we didn't exactly have permission to be here. We were kind of sneaking in. Although, you know, the German Priory, they're not like the Order of Whispers. They're not the most secretive group. At the same time, he's explaining we didn't have permission to be there, so we're kind of like sneaking around. And Nihilus, of course, being a thief with the Order of Whispers and the Ash Legion, we kind of followed his lead on sneaking in. And Skoll just mentioned he was really hungry, so he raided the kitchens. So that's all you missed. So we got here. Nihilus mentioned he borrowed a book on possession. Apparently, his house was possessed by some kind of dark forces. So that's why he borrowed the book. And again, as far as I understand, this is based on a storyline that his character was going through, that he was actually role-playing through. It wasn't just something he made up on a whim. So you don't know that immediately when you play with someone, but it's always fun to get to know these things because they are role-playing alternative lives. It's like you're living a virtual life when you're role-playing. So a lot goes on, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can find out when you actually take the effort to get to know a character. So while Eckhart, Skoll, and Nihilus are just talking a little bit about their attitudes towards late fees at the library, I do want to let you guys know about another YouTube series. It's by a user called Tarcanus Frostbourne. I really hope I pronounced that right. And basically, there are also videos on role-playing. He shows you some examples of in-game role-playing. And again, it more focuses on tips and strategies for role-playing. So they're, just short little videos on tips and good strategies to employ when role-playing. It does take place in World of Warcraft. So again, it's a different game. However, a lot of the principles that apply to World of Warcraft apply to really every role-playing game. And you can even take some of them and apply them to like tabletop role-playing or even live-action role-playing. Really, it's all about being in character and being considerate of other players who are in character and sort of playing off the shared imagination that you have. So it's definitely worth checking out if you are either looking to start role-playing or you've been role-playing for a while but you're looking to, make it a little easier and learn some new strategies. So I'll leave a link to that in the description below the video if you're watching this on YouTube. Other than that, Eckhart is gonna end his little journey here. He's obviously excited to be at the German Priory, so it's a good place for him to rest for a while and maybe take advantage of the vast pools of knowledge they have here. So this is where we're going to end off. It was really fun getting to meet these two characters. Hopefully you'll get to see more of them in the future. And thank you for watching. Again, this is Anchor. You've been watching the Krytan Chronicler, and keep role-playing.